Hello, everyone, and welcome again to another Teacher Joseph podcast. Today, we're going to look at the phrasal verb to spew out. Now, the reason why this phrasal verb came up is because yesterday I was talking to one of my friends about the days before the internet. We used to have these big computer terminals in offices, airports, and other places. It was like a keyboard built into a desk, and they used to spew out this perforated paper at all times. There was always this really weird printing noise, and it would be spewing out paper which was laid out in a particular way so that it rested behind the terminal. And you could just tear it off, whatever bit you wanted, because it was perforated into big squares. So spewing out is when something is ejected with great force, okay? Volcanoes, they spew out lava. What else spews out? Well, people, sometimes if they've been drinking water and they choke, for example, or maybe if you're out with your friends, they're drinking some soda and you make them laugh, they'll suddenly spew out all of the water they've been drinking. It's not quite as serious as vomiting, but spewing out just means when something is ejected, basically. So volcanoes do it, printers from the 70s and 80s do it. What else spews out? Well, if you live at a place which has a large factory, maybe a chimney can spew out the smoke. So if you've got a factory in the middle of your town, I'm sure there is some part of it which is spewing out smoke or steam. There's still some around here, but we don't see them very often because they're no longer environmentally friendly. They're not allowed to spew out so much because it's bad for the environment. The exhaust of cars, especially cars which have not been serviced, often spew out fumes from the exhaust, that little pipe at the back of the car. So if there's any problem with that, they would be spewing out a lot. Or maybe when you first start the car, they spew out something from the back through the exhaust pipe. Now, I don't drive, so maybe that's all changed now. But as far as I remember, cars have little pipes at the back spewing out exhaust fumes. Here in the UK, because we generally don't like to use language about physical actions like vomiting, we wouldn't use spew out really as something physical or personal. Okay, so we use it more as a metaphor. So, for example, I can say, my neighbor knocked on my door a few days ago, and she was spewing out such hatred that I had to just stop her and say, I don't want to listen to this. So, to spew out in British English is often used as a metaphor, or maybe about a factory, or about a burst water well or dam, but it's rarely used as a synonym for vomiting from your stomach. Having said that, in other parts of the English world, particularly in America and Australia, it's used much more directly to talk about spewing up or spewing out if maybe you've eaten something bad. It's basically when something gushes out with great volume, okay? So if I turn on the tap in the kitchen, okay, then it will spew out water, especially first thing in the morning when it hasn't been used all night. I turn it on, there's nothing coming, and then there's a little kind of a pop, which presumably is air, or at least I hope it's air. And then after that, the water comes with great force the first time, and then it calms down a little bit. So that's called spewing. Spewing. So let's just go through some quick examples. Let's imagine you're digging in the garden. You can say, a liquid started spewing out of the pipe as soon as we hit it with our shovels. You know, the shovel is that thing that you dig the garden with. Or you could say, the garden hose. You know, if you're watering your garden, you have the hose, that long rubber pipe. The hose started spewing out this green liquid because I hadn't used it since last summer. You could say I got so drunk that I was spewing up, but it's not really British to say that. That's more American. And also in Australian English, they talk about spewing in a similar metaphorical way to us. If someone's very angry, they start to spew or spew out anger. In the end of the debate, my opponent was spewing out unprovable accusations. And this takes different forms, okay? We're talking about spewing up, but it can also be spewing out in the case of the computer terminals we used to use. You know, if you're very young, you really missed something there. You really should Google something like teleprinter or terminals before internet, because these things were so noisy. And if you worked for any company, they had a number of these which were always spewing out messages or spewing data in different ways. And where these terminals were kept, if there was 3 or 4 of them, was often called the machine room or the communications room. And I can still hear the noise of those printers. It was like those old printers before LaserJet came. It was like a really strange ee. You could hear it printing every letter, similar to a typewriter maybe at high speed, but very, very fast. And then if you run out of printer ribbons, because it looked the same as a typewriter ribbon, if you forgot to buy one of those ribbons, you had a big problem, because that thing was keeping all of its information waiting for a new ribbon. So if you didn't get that new ribbon until the next day, you put it in and it immediately just started printing from where it had stopped or where it had left off. You might think that's not a bad thing, but a day's worth of printing, now that was rough, huh? Really. And you couldn't stop it. You had no control over it, even if you unplugged it, which, as I recall, you couldn't do anyway because they were sometimes connected to the electricity in your office. I don't remember much about how we used to reset them, but yeah, they could be rough. And that constant spewing of paper, well, I don't think that would be allowed these days. 15 of those machines could seriously damage your hearing. And we used to have office boys who would be quickly printing off that paper, well, they weren't printing it exactly, it was printing itself. They would have to uh, tear off the different information that was coming in because the paper was all perforated anyway. So every bit of paper was like a square. It just ripped off. And those boys would run with it to the front office, or if it was a newsroom, to the reporter's desk, It was quite frightening how much paper those things used. And then, of course, they were replaced by screens. I think it was Burroughs who first made those. And then slowly from there came the telex terminals. And then from there, they called them teleprinters, which were much smaller. And those kind of printers are the ones that produce receipts in shops. They're like little boxes, and the paper just comes up and you rip them off. But yeah, they were like musical instruments. It was like sitting at a piano. The thing was huge. Yeah. Anyway, that's spewing out or spewing up. You can use that phrasal verb interchangeably. Very nice, very nice. And for some of you, I think this has been a trip down memory lane because I'm sure not all of you listening are very young. So if you ever worked in an office before the 1990s, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Paper being spewed out at every opportunity. That's it from me. I hope you've enjoyed this. See you all soon. Bye.